Hello there, Shortcuts. This is Stephen here. This is the first of two lists of records that will be available to you all this Wednesday, July 24th at 9 p.m. As usual, if you would like to be on the email price list, then drop me a note at shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. It's that simple. This is a classic rock list, but the first four records all have posters or close to. For those of you who've been Shortcuts members for a while, you'll know the Japanese had a predilection for extras, games, postcards, posters. And so I have the first four records have posters of various kinds, some of which you'll be, I think, surprised by, some of which you might be delighted by. All right, so the lead-off record has to be this. The Rolling Stones' all-time classic record, Let It Bleed, with the Cake by Delia Smith on the cover, and the gramophone record, and the chunk taken out of it. This is the Japanese first press, and that is the gatefold on the inside. The question is, where does Let It Bleed rank on the classic Stones discography? I must admit, I'm of the view that they never really released a fully classic album after Goat's Head Soup. After that, things are pretty patchy for me. But running up to Goat's Head Soup, you've 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, depending on how you want to count it, of not just great Rolling Stones records, but some of the greatest rock and roll ever made. And so, where does this stack in the canon? Well, for me, my number one, I think, is, and will probably now forever be, Exile on Main Street. But after Exile, I flip around between this record and Beggar's Banquet, and then slightly below that is Sticky Fingers for me. The title track of this, Let It Bleed, is in fact the opening track. Legend has it that Keith Richards was playing his acoustic guitar for so long that his fingers began to bleed and he couldn't play any longer. I don't know if that's true. The band deny it, but it wouldn't surprise me. And even more, in some ways, I mean, we all know that Exile on Main Street was kind of had a drug haze all the way through it. But this is quite a trippy, druggy album too. I mean, Brian Jones was really a peripheral figure by this point. If you look at the credits, he's only credited for maracas playing on, I think it might be Midnight Rambler and maybe one other track. He's really peripheral, and so you do have that kind of hanging over it. You've got Gimme Shelter here, misspelt on the Japanese first press, as you can see. Not just the greatest Rolling Stones track of all time, I think arguably maybe the greatest rock and roll track, full stop. It's so dense and dark and has an absolutely cataclysmic guitar sound. And then Mary Clayton just absolutely smashes it out the park on the rape and murder verse or background vocal. I mean, just incredible. The 7-minute Midnight Rambler become a live staple. The country honk, the early version of Honky Tonk Woman, which I prefer, I think. Although the violin is super high in the mix on the country honk version on this. Monkey Man's amazing. And you can't always get what you want. I guess if you were looking at it, some kind of high level thing, the their answer to Let It Bleed. But you may ask yourself, what's the poster in this? Well, it's a little bit different. I'm going to have to stand up. Inside the first press is this amazing pullout, and it's got, you can kind of see images of all the band with the lyrics. And I must admit, the translations on these particular lyrics are really wonderful, especially since Mick Jagger is not the most articulate of singers, even at the best of times, but that is the Japanese first press of Let It Bleed. What a record. All right, number 2, which will be accompanied by a poster, is an early Japanese press in fantastic condition of Led Zeppelin 1. Let me show you the poster. This is magnificent. Look at that. Yeah. I don't think that's been folded out many times, and I'm being pretty careful with it. Led Zeppelin 1. You know, the New Yardbirds. John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, John Bonham, and Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page credited on this record electric guitar, acoustic guitar, and pedal steel guitar, which he taught himself for this album. Robert Plant, of course, lead vocalist, but crucially, harmonica player. And what a harmonica player he is. An underrated and utilized to my, ears, talent that he had. I wish he played more. John Bonham, drums, timpani, and backing vocals, which I think is always interesting. I always try and pick, where are the backing vocals that John Bonham adds? I get John Paul Jones, he was super talented, bass and organ. What a debut album this was. Other than the pedal steel that he plays, Jimmy Page recorded this entire album on a Stratocaster, which he hardly played again in their discography. Executive producer Peter Grant. Well, I think that Led Zeppelin 1 is one of the great debut albums of the 60s, without any question. What a sleeve as well. Just an iconic album. Hindenburg on Fire. And that poster is magnificent. It's very similar to the Atlantic Green poster that came with some versions of Led Zeppelin 2, which I've had before. But I don't remember having that poster of Led Zeppelin 1. What a record. I love the Japanese versions of it too. The bass is super tight. Okay. All right. Now here's two records that you will not be expecting. Well, it's all part of the fun. This is a white label promo. I'm just going to show you the white label promo of the debut album by Lone Justice, of course, with the miraculous voice of Maria McKee, produced by Jimmy Iovine. And where do you see the poster that came with this? Look at that. There you go. Magnificent poster. It says Lone Justice Maria McKee on vocals down the bottom. I've never seen that before. This is one of these records that when you listen back to it, you wonder how it wasn't just massive. And she really only had one solo hit with Show Me Heaven, which was a biggie, of course. But I don't know. Maria McKee just didn't fulfill her potential. But this album has its fans. This is in, by the way, absolutely mint condition. I do love it when I get the white label promos because often they went to radio stations and were just never played. Even the insert, the whole thing's just immaculate. And for the Maria McKee fans, that poster is wonderful. All right. This next one is probably the weirdest, most obscure of all, but I think, I'm looking at it now, is the best poster of them all. All right. Now, the Go-Go's debut album is one of my favorites, but this is Belinda by Belinda Carlisle, her debut solo album. Now, this kicks off with Mad About You, which is, I think, one of her all-time best songs. And you know what? This record stands up. It's a lot of fun. But wait till you see the poster that came with it. This poster is pretty amazing. Look at that. It's huge as well. A really, really beautiful photo. Really beautiful photo of Belinda Carlisle in a massive poster. Now, this record is a really fine pop rock record. And, of course, she hit big with Heaven and Earth on her next album, which was kind of, I think, massively overproduced. That one's really fun. And if you're a Go-Go's fan, you'll find a lot to enjoy. But the poster is spectacular. Okay. Now, some classics and some bits and pieces. We'll go through these pretty quickly now. But here's an unusual one. This is a Japan-only release. It was a promo. You can see at the top here. Not for sale promo of a kind of chronological order of the best Fleetwood Mac songs from Fleetwood Mac, their self-titled album in 75, I think that was, through to Tango in the Night. So I'm just going to read you the tracks. Big Love, Little Lies, Rhiannon, Go Your Own Way, Sarah, Tango in the Night, Seven Wonders, Dreams, Hold Me, I'm So Afraid, Oh Daddy, and Oh Well. Now, this is the thing. So it shows on the front, Fleetwood Mac, Rumours, Tusk, the live album, Mirage, and Tango in the Night, of course, which was really the thing that precipitated this. But to go back to Oh Well, which I think is from the live album. I haven't listened to the live album in a really long time, but I think that's what makes sense. The whole story all in on the back, but have a look at that label. Look, Pioneer Super Hits of Fleetwood Mac. This is a very rare and hard to find compilation. I have one copy that's on my shelf, and this copy. This is something my wife reaches for quite often, and it sounds amazing too. So there you go. The Super Hits of Fleetwood Mac, promo only in Japan. Does not exist anywhere else. Now we have 4 in a row of Shortcuts royalty. So for those of you who aren't aware, Shortcuts royalty are records that over the course of the 6 years of the club, enough of us have acquired for us to recognize them as a stamp of quality. And these are 4, there's 3 first presses and 1 repress. Number 1, ZZ Top's Eliminator, 1983, released in the same year as Thriller and Let's Dance and Madonna's debut album. And it reintroduced the blues boogie of ZZ Top to the world with that synthesizer sheen, but that same bar band blues attitude. So legs and Give Me All Your Lovin', and all these massive hits. You know, somewhere, I don't know, this sold well north of 10 million copies. Easily ZZ Top's highest selling album. And a lovely, lovely sounding pressing as well. Now, this is the only of the 4 Shortcuts royalty. This is the only repress. And this is because these represses are wonderful. And this is the repress series of Steely Dan records, including this one, the Royal Scam. Number 5, I think it's number 5 in the Steely Dan discography. Easily the weirdest sleeve. Look, so you've got this. So this was originally a picture that was designed for a Van Morrison album, and then they added this sleeping person on this bench with these kind of shoes hanging off the end, and then these skyscrapers all topped with monsters. And that reminds me, so this t-shirt I'm wearing today is a little representation of each of the Steely Dan albums, a little thing taken off each. So that's Can't Buy Me a Thrill, obviously that's Asia. But the Royal Scam is this one. So you can see the 4 monsters. And of course, that's the representation of the 4 monsters on the top of each of the skyscrapers. They used to kind of get teased about their record sleeves because some of them are awful. Can't Buy Me a Thrill is a terrible sleeve as well. But it's a great record. The opening track on this, Kid Charlemagne, was a minor hit. But it's got the Fez and the title track and Golden Earrings, which I really like as well. It's a very, very fine album indeed. Steely Dan's The Royal Scam. So that's the second Shortcuts royalty. We've mentioned Fleetwood Mac already. That is the first press of Rumours. Nothing more need to be said. It sounds amazing. I am going to talk about this one. This is one of my all-time favourite Japanese presses. It is the Japanese first press with Obi of U2's The Unforgettable Fire. This is maybe my favourite U2 album. Maybe this, maybe it's Europa, I don't know. But in terms of sound quality, this is the best I've ever heard it. Now, I have not heard the Mo-Fi. I have tried to pick up a copy of the Mobile Fidelity version of this record a few times, and I've never been able to. But this absolutely, completely annihilates the Aussie copy, which sounds like it's underwater. It's great. All right, we've got a couple of rock records from the 70s, and then a few bits and pieces to finish. This is Saints and Sinners. This is, I think, maybe the 7th or 8th Whitesnake album. Now, the previous record to this, Come and Get It, had been terribly received and was a bit of a flop. This was David Coverdale's kind of, let's go back to our roots. And this is a much more kind of genuine rock band feel to it. It is pretty raw. I like the guitar sound. What's interesting about this, of course, is that there were a couple of tracks on here that were then re-recorded for subsequent albums, the most famous of which is Here I Go Again, which was the opening track on side 2. I much prefer the version that's on here. Now, there was another one that was re-recorded. I can't remember whether it was Rock and Roll Angels or Victim of Love, but there were 2 tracks that were kind of redone off the back of this. Amongst Whitesnake aficionados, there's plenty who say that's their best album. This is the Japanese, I don't know if it's at first or second press, but it's in magnificent condition. Now, this is an unusual one. I don't think I've ever had this before. This is Peter Criss by Kiss, the Japanese first press of the solo record that all of them did at that time. And of course, here's the sleeves of all of them. There you go. I've had the Paul Stanley before, maybe the Gene Simmons. I don't remember having the Peter Criss, but Peter Criss, easily the most idiosyncratic and odd of each of them, but therefore an interesting listen. Okay, what do we got here? We have an early Japanese press of Rubber Soul. Now, this one is on not the typical hard, this one's on the flip back sleeve. Now, usually these sleeves are in terrible condition, but this one is really, really nice. And I can see here the yen value of 2000. This is a very early press. I'm not sure if it's first or not. I'm going to have to dig around and see. But it's a lovely, lovely copy of the wonderful record. I have a few to go. I'm going to flick through these pretty quickly. This is the Super 20s. So this was a series of albums that was released by NM on the green label. I think it's mid-70s, 75 and 76. They did a Supermax of Red Charles and the Rolling Stones. It's the first time I've seen the Supermax of the Carpenters. And of course, what does that mean? You get this really massive package, but you have got every one of the Carpenters classics, like Superstar, etc., on there in a beautiful, beautiful package. Quite a quirky one with Obi as well. All right, we also have Long May You Run by Stephen Stills and Neil Young. I had never heard of this album until I listened to MTV Unplugged by Neil Young in the 90s, which was an amazing album, and he played Long May You Run, one of my favourites, and that's therefore always been on my radar since then. It's a super mellow, melodic record. There's quite a clear distinction between the Stephen Stills songs and the Neil Young songs, and the debate continues as to which are the best. All right, first time on the list for this really, really interesting record. There's the inner. It is 1989's Back to the Egg by Wings. This one has not been on my radar at all, and so it's such an odd title, such an odd concept. But I've been reading the blogs, and what you get with this record, at the time it was slaughtered in the press, but then so was McCartney 2, which I think is amazing. And this one, I played it earlier, it is quite new wave, but also quite heavy guitar on this one. And when you look at the blogs of those who know their McCartney, it's got its fan club, I can tell you that. All right, two really popular and massive selling records to finish. Both of these are first presses of the Eagles' greatest hits, and look at this, Turaye by Dexy's Midnight Runners, just to close out the list. So there you have it. Some Shortcuts royalty, Steely Dan, U2, also some rock and roll from Whitesnake and Peter Criss and Kiss, but also some posters and some really interesting packages from the Carpenters, Belinda Carlisle, Lone Justice, and then right at the top, Led Zeppelin 1 with poster, and the Japanese first press of Let It Bleed, which sounds amazing, by the way. There you have it. First list, there's a soul and blues and jazz list to come. Thank you for watching, and if you want to be on the price list to grab some of those records, shoot me an email, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Bye.